The 15th BRICS Summit will gather at the Sandton Convention Centre from the 22nd until the 24th of this month. Now, among the key agenda items is the expansion of the bloc, which currently consists of 5 founding members: Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. 21 nations have so far showed interest in becoming part of this established trade, economic and political bloc. For more on this conversation, we are now joined by international relations expert Anthoni Van Nieuwkerk. Anthony, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, with over 20 countries that have shown interest in joining the bloc, South Africa has one of the smallest economies within this club. Does expanding the BRICS bloc pose a threat to South Africa's position on the bloc?
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity. And that's a provocative opening question. If size of economy counts, then there's real competition between South Africa and Nigeria. And Nigeria might be one of the newcomers, the new members of BRICS after the summit this month in Johannesburg, in Sandton. And in fact, we're already beginning to talk of BRICS Plus, meaning the original founding members plus a number of others. I don't know if 20 will join, but I think important countries who play a leadership role in their regions will be considered to join BRICS as the new members. So it's true that South Africa doesn't have the biggest economy. It might even not have the biggest economy in Africa, but I think because South Africa is a founding member of BRICS and because South Africa has a very strong relationship with the BRICS members, China, Russia, Brazil and India, it will remain a founding member. I don't think its position is under any threat. If anything, if Africa's position can be strengthened in this enlarged BRICS arrangement, then so much better for Africa.
I mean, the expansion has been viewed as a route to build diplomatic clout to counter the Western's dominance at the UN. What do you believe would be some of the benefits for the existing members if this expansion should take place?
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, the talk in town is that this enlarged BRICS Plus might now finally become a sort of an alternative anchor point or a platform, if you want, for members of the global south, the developing countries, of which there are a large number, including all of Africa, maybe minus Mauritius and Seychelles, to find their own voice and agency to counter the very powerful and dominant narratives that come from the West, and in particular the platforms that they've created to pursue their own, economic interests and political interests and strategic. For example, the G7 or the G20, they even dominate the Security Council and the UN in general. So BRICS Plus will become this alternative platform for developing countries to voice their concern, and also, let me be more positive, not only to complain about the way that the Americans dominate world affairs, but to say there's a better way of managing war and peace, for example. And the best example that comes to mind is that the West and NATO is embroiled in a conflict with Russia that plays out in Ukraine. BRICS is going to take a very different approach, I think. It's going to say, let's find a way to peace. Let's see if we can broker peace between the warring parties. There are many involved in Ukraine. And so where global governance breaks down, where the United Nations fails to play a peacemaking role, this new enlarged BRICS can come in and play that very constructive role.
I mean, speaking about the role that BRICS would play, and maybe let's just touch on the formation of the BRICS Bank, the call for an alternative trading currency and the push for de-dollarization. We know that the BRICS group, as it is right now, accounts for 31% of global GDP. It makes up 42% of the world's population, but it only contributes 18% to global trade. Is it too premature a conversation to have with regards to that alternative trading currency?
Yeah, that's the other talk of the town, apart from enlarging BRICS, who's going to join? And people are very keen and curious to find out who from Middle East, who from Africa, who from Latin America, who from Asia is going to join BRICS. France wanted to attend, but we know France is not going to come and visit us anytime soon,
right,
given the problems in West Africa at the moment. So BRICS, many people say that BRICS is first and foremost a grouping of countries who work on their own economic interests and they try and coordinate their strategies. I think it's true. It's now going to play a more political role going forward. But the time is too soon to say that BRICS will now offer the world an alternative currency. The dollar is mighty and dominates global trade and will continue to do so for a long time. But what BRICS is saying already, and I think it's already taking off, is the idea that neighbors in a region can trade with each other without using the dollar. And in fact, the best example is Southern Africa. You know, here we have a customs union between 5 or 6 countries, South Africa and its neighbors, and the rand is the trading currency. So we don't have to rely on the dollar. In fact, Africa doesn't have to rely on the dollar or the French currency. It can begin to trade in the currencies that it is comfortable with. And I think that is the beginning, or the building blocks of something that might in the future become even more important in terms of countering the power of the dollar and the power of American hegemony.
And speaking of that power, I mean, do you believe that certain factors, such as the stringent conditions from the IMF and the World Bank with regards to borrowing to some African countries, the blocking of the production of vaccines in Africa, as well as just the denial of Africa having a permanent seat on the UN, do you find these as attractive motives for some of these countries, such as the UAE, in wanting to become part of the BRICS Plus bloc?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question. It's got many facets to it. The UAE or any other Gulf state would not necessarily need the BRICS Development Bank. In fact, they might put resources into it. They've got lots of money. They're cash flush. They're seeking to play an important expanded role. And some of them will join BRICS, but they'll join for strategic reasons and to help economically for BRICS countries to avoid what some people call, a trap. When you go to the IMF and the World Bank, loans come with preconditions. You have to change the way that you manage your economy and your political system even before you can qualify for those loans. And I think the BRICS Development Bank will have a slightly different approach, and it will support each other without those political conditions that comes from the West.
So, Anthony, do you believe that post the 24th of August, once all these conversations have happened, we'll have a new outlook with regards to the world and what would possibly happen with some of these countries joining the BRICS bloc?
Yeah. Well, I mean, world affairs do not turn on one event or one summit or one conference. So I think this summit is important, and it's going to set the scene or create the conditions for countries in the global south, in the developing world, to find each other and to build on common strategies and approaches so that it's their own national interests, economic, political, and strategic, can be better served by working together in this emerging broader alliance. So I think it's a positive. It's the beginning. I mean, I don't think that at the end of the month, we will know exactly who the new members are, because allow me to say this very quickly. There's a bit of a debate inside BRICS what the membership criteria ought to be for other countries to join. I mean, if Lesotho knocks on the door and Nigeria knocks on the door, do you allow both to become members, or do you choose one? On what basis? So I think there's a bit of a competition inside, and the Chinese and the Indians and the Brazilians have different views on this. But I'm not concerned about this. I think they will find each other fairly quickly. And I think it's really important that those countries who are leaders in their own regions, Nigeria and West Africa is a good example, will join BRICS and then become important players going forward. So for the next year or two, I think we're going to see how, as the world changes and as America is beginning to lose that very powerful influence in world affairs, and as China rises, as the West declines and the East rises, BRICS will become an important player in this new world of ours.
Well, it certainly is one to look out for. Very interesting times that we're living in. Thank you so much for your time.